Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined by my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. So we are going to have a conversation on the Derek Chauvin trial. And yeah, we're going to have a conversation on the Chauvin trial. And interestingly enough, this trial, I have serious feelings about this. Um, Look, I don't take issue with a police officer taking the greatest of acts, the maximum justice, in order, the maximum justice, in order to kind of make sure they get home straight. I don't like it, but I get it. It's one of those things, those aspects of the law that just so happen takes place at the worst of scenarios. The cop can't make it out alive. The cop is clear that somebody is about to injure him, about to hurt him. He makes a choice. It's a split second choice. It takes a man's life. The man ends up having a gun. Fair enough. I get it. But it's different when the person has loose cigarettes and you're putting the guy in the chokehold to the point where the guy can't breathe and the guy dies. And you find out that that cop had other issues of anger management, and for that matter, did the exact same thing prior. Maybe it didn't necessarily kill the person, but definitely was reprimanded for it. In the case of Chauvin, a man in front of a crowd kneels on another man's throat for 8 minutes, and he's shocked that that man couldn't breathe and died. Despite the fact that the man kept saying, "I can't breathe," despite the fact that at one point the man even called for his mom. It is a hard video to watch. And I suppose that's why that video galvanized a population. I made the point before that cops kill 1,000 people a year, and 99% are not charged with anything. And even within the context of the 1% that's charged, 33%, or only 33%, serve jail time. If you are a cop, you are basically, at least by those numbers, bulletproof in the context of the law. And that bulletproof in the context of law has allowed a level of cavalierness with other people's lives. I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6, basically. And that is unfortunate, because the job of the cop is not just to murder or to injure or to take to jail. It is also to protect, and to protect even the individuals that are having that bad day. That guy has a family. That guy has loved ones. And even though you don't particularly like that guy right now because that guy is doing things that is annoying you, trust me, they still would prefer them home. Shane, what are your thoughts? Look, man, I am not one of those people that see a crime or a murder take place, meaning or a killing takes place from the standpoint of a cop, and will undermine the cop's safety. Meaning there's no situation I'm going to look at and think to myself, if there is any benefit of the doubt that I can give the cop from the standpoint of he had to pull that gun, his life was in danger, he's shot. I would not do that. I'm not one of those people. This is not that case. This is different. And in a case where the person is being shot in the back, which many of them are, in a case where the person is already restrained and they are basically doing things that ends up getting that person killed, yes, I think there should be great consequences, especially since the law and their responsibility is also to keep that individual safe. What are your thoughts? Am I being too hard here? Because in my head, I'm being fair in regards to the way I'm recounting this. But what am I missing in this?
Well, we've gone over this a decent amount. What's going to matter in the trial, in my opinion, is what comes out during the trial and how it affects the conviction, if there is one. You know, how it affects the decision by the court of whether Chauvin was guilty or not guilty of the crimes that many in America already think he committed. And it seems to me like he committed too. I'm not trying to wiggle around here. But if the court comes back and says he's not guilty, my question is, what happens then? If they say he is guilty, is that going to serve as is that going to serve as a sort of preface for some wider process of legal reform? Very doubtful. There's not going to be a long-term interrogation of the American justice system or policing right now, based on everything else that's going on and based on the fact that it was really last summer that all this attention was leveled at it. And now that attention has dissipated and been replaced with, the coronavirus first, and then immigration more recently, and now the filibuster for some policy wonks. It's just other issues have come up and have taken the day, which means this is going to be an ongoing thing that we're going to see again. So in that sense, it's, the trial of Derek Chauvin isn't legally significant widely for the nation, but as an optical phenomenon, as something that's going to affect what people think about the American state and what people think about our courts, it's going to be really significant. And as far as I can tell, it is actually an open question. This is not like an open and shut case um, in either direction, because the dude did have a lot of drugs in his system, and those would have contributed to his death. It seems like those very well could have contributed to his death. Of course, on the other hand, a police officer using what at that point was a legal hold for him to use, but nevertheless seems heinous for many minutes, cutting off his blood flow, apparently cutting off the access of oxygen to his brain. There's definitely a case to be made there too. I don't know how this is going to come out.
Neither do I.
I'll turn it to you. Do you?
Yeah,
that's
no, I don't know how it's going to turn out. And when they're talking about because cops have such latitude. I mean, like I said, 99% walk. I mean, it's like that number is astonishing when you think about it. Like, do you honestly believe that when cops pull their gun, they're 99% accurate? Meaning, like, it's 99% of the time, it is a clean, legitimate kill. I don't believe that for a moment. And so that number is ungodly, it's unhuman in some level. Now, the question then becomes, how does this turn out? They're talking about like third degree murder and all of this other stuff. What happens if he walks? More importantly, what happens if he gets like a third degree charge? Is that adequate? I mean, I don't have an answer to this. I mean, he legitimately can walk up that courtroom and they can make the argument that, look, what took place here was legal. You may not like it. You may hate it. You may think it's abominable, but it's legal. They may argue that. Like they could say that there's nothing wrong with that hold. That hold is perfectly legit. And look, the jury might buy it. So I don't know. I mean, the only difference here might be just because of the level of radical pushback that this act got. Because this act got millions of people from all around the world. I mean, I remember Australia was marching. Like, did you see that? It looked like a million people in Australia.
I did, but should the courts be affected by that? I would say no. I would say it is. If suddenly the courts start getting affected by public opinion, then all you have is mob rule. And I'm not saying that specifically about this situation, but it's just true in a general sense. All you have is the majority of the opinion of the majority deciding matters that get brought to their attention. And I don't like where that goes. And I don't like the courts being subject unduly and overwhelmingly to that influence. That's not good for democracy. It's not good for the courts. So I don't want that.
But that's not really the argument I'm making. I'm just saying it happened.
I get you.
Yeah, I'm just saying it happened. I'm just saying, like, that case created such an uproar all around the world that it just seemed like, I guess I don't say that to say that the courts should be influenced by it. I guess I'm saying the courts are going to be influenced by it, if that makes sense. It's a slight difference. It's like how does the individual not see that and not experience that in regards to their environment on some level because they're human beings? Does that make sense? Like it's yeah, I guess I'm making the point that how do people avoid being influenced by that? And just as being a human being themselves, of course, they're going to have an opinion and a take on it. So no, it's interesting. Oh, we have Albert. Excellent.
Yeah, let's bring him on. We're joined now by Albert Guillory, former member of both the Louisiana State Senate and Louisiana House of Representatives. Albert, thank you for being with us, and thank you for joining a couple minutes early, too. Really appreciate it. How are you doing this morning?
Very well. How are you?
Good. We're having a conversation, and so far an agreeable one on what's going on with Derek Chauvin, the trial of Derek Chauvin over the killing of George Floyd last year. I say killing, but that is that is what's being decided during this court case, whether or not Derek Chauvin is responsible, either in part or in full, for the death of George Floyd. I want to turn to you. I believe you work as an attorney and know you have legal experience on these matters. What is your take on this issue, Albert?
50 years as a criminal defense lawyer. Yes, I do have a take on this one. The issues are going to be what caused the death, of Floyd, and whether it was fentanyl and meth, the drugs that he had in his system, and his ill health, or the knee. Now, the coroner, interestingly, says there are, and I quote the coroner, no telltale signs of asphyxiation. So the coroner also says he died, his death was a homicide. So that'll be an interesting battle. The big question, of course, is why was the knee on the neck and 3 cops holding him down for 9 minutes? Was the 9 minutes too long? Why was it necessary for 3 cops to hold him down? Obviously, he was resisting, and he was that resistance. He was a large man, too, 6'3", 233 pounds. So that resistance at some point was valid and necessary. But how necessary was the 9 minutes on the neck? That's really the crux of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree with that assessment. That basically, look, I don't begrudge a cop for holding somebody or taking a nap that basically tries to stop somebody if the individual is trying to, I don't know, escape or being threatening or fighting back. Fair enough. He's a person and he's going to do what he needs to do in order to kind of maintain his own safety and, for that matter, to try to arrest the person. But I think the problem is justifying being on somebody's neck for 9 minutes. And to do so when that person is clearly in distress, when that person is clearly begging for help and assistance, saying that they can't breathe. And look, it's callous at a certain point. That needs to be justified. And to me, that can't be justified. Especially with the other cops that are sitting around the public saying, hey, what are you guys doing? Meaning the fight back stopped 7 minutes prior or 8 minutes prior. So at that point, it just seems punitive, especially if you're going into some of the other previous history that apparently Floyd might have had with Chauvin. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is that a fair assessment in regards to the way that the prosecution, or for that matter, that the defense attorney is trying to is going to have to argue and is going to have to justify? Am I thinking about this right?
I think that you are 100% on point. There's one thing that you left out, and that is that he, at the very beginning of his encounter with the police, before when he was in the car and they started getting him out of the vehicle, he started saying then, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. So the fact that he continued to say, I can't breathe, while the man was on his neck. I mean, 15 minutes later, for 15 minutes, he's been complaining, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. It lost its credibility. There came a point when he probably could not breathe, and he was dying as a result. But he had been lying about it for such a long time and under circumstances that were clearly, I mean, he was sitting in the car. The cop says, get out, and he says, I can't breathe, starts complaining immediately. I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He lost his credibility, and that worked against him. I am not justifying 9 minutes of a knee, but I am simply saying that this is a fact that needs to be considered by the jury as they deliberate.
I hear, you know what, we got to go into a break here, and we'll come back with you, continue this conversation. You say he lost his credibility, but he also ended up losing his life. And I know that excited delirium, which is Chauvin's defense here, that Floyd was suffering from excited delirium and that's what killed him. I know that excited delirium is a medical term, and I don't mean to demean or confuse the term by using it in a slightly different way. But it seems clear to me, looking at the video, that George Floyd was not excited. He was not excitable. He was sedated at that point. Not literally by a drug that they administered, but he wasn't moving. He wasn't resisting, as far as I can tell, from before they had him on the ground immediately to the point where he was on the ground. And so it begs the question. I mean, they had an ambulance on the way to pick him up and to treat him. And of course, for a lot of people watching this video, it's just minute after minute after minute of Chauvin with his knee on the guy's neck. And even if there are, from what you said in the coroner's report, no physical signs of asphyxiation. It's not like his windpipe got cracked. But what a lot of people looking at this would think is, if you're applying pressure in a vital organ while the guy is already suffering from possibly drug-induced asphyxiation, drug-induced breathlessness, lack of oxygen to the brain, it seems like cutting off that blood flow would just add into it. And if he was already saying he couldn't breathe, why put your knee on the guy's neck? That doesn't seem like a justified next step. That doesn't seem like that should have been the recourse. But we need to go into a break, and I want to bring you back so you can respond to all that. We're listening to the voice of Albert Guillory, former member of both the Louisiana State Senate and Louisiana House of Representatives, and a long-established criminal defense attorney for over 50 years. You're also listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back with Albert in a minute on the other side of this short break. Be right back.
Fault Lines. Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan, and we're talking about the trial of Derek Chauvin and the death of George Floyd. We're joined by Albert Guillory, former member of both the Louisiana State Senate and Louisiana House of Representatives, and longtime 50-year defense attorney. You can follow Albert on Twitter, by the way, at Albert Guillory. Just like that. Albert, I said a few things there before we went to break, and something else I want to get to, and maybe we can turn there in a couple of minutes, is how this has become a public spectacle. It has become an optical thing for the public over the course of almost a year now, and how that is arguably, not technically, but arguably a bigger event than the actual trial or the death of Floyd. This sparked off last summer's Black Lives Matter protests, and whatever way the verdict comes down, whether it's guilty, not guilty, or some mix with the different charges, I wanted to hear your take on how that could go. But first, I said a couple of things before we went out. Any response you want to give there, Albert?
I think that everything that you said is accurate. I would conclude it by saying that Floyd should not have been breaking the law. The police were called because he was violating the law. He should not have resisted the police. That was his fatal mistake, was resisting the police to the point where 3 officers had to take him down to the ground and hold him down there for a period of time. The police officer, should not have knelt on his neck after the resistance stopped. I think that was, he was just punishing him, and that was malfeasance and did certainly contribute to his death, in my opinion. That he should be held accountable, the police officer.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, yes, he shouldn't have been breaking the law. And I know some people, I think for me, one of the greatest aggravations to me is when, and a lot of people on the right do this, and less on the left, but a lot of people on the right, they would act as if the breaking of the law in and of itself necessitates or justifies maximum justice. That because an individual broke the law that particular day, something that a lot of people do, by the way. I mean, we have 5% of the world's population, 25% of that population in our prisons. But the cop is there also to keep that guy safe also. Like, his responsibilities don't go to the notion that just because you can justify a death or killing doesn't mean you should do it. And just because an individual breaks the law, it doesn't necessarily necessitate, or for that matter, justify maximum justice. Like in the very specific case of Floyd, you can make an argument that they basically had to restrain him. Okay, fair enough. You can make an argument that in the pursuit of that restraint, they had to get aggressive. Okay, fair enough. But the issue becomes at the moment where the individual, if the cop has the capacity to do their job, meaning get the person and subdue that person without killing him, they should do that. Nobody is saying that they should do something to the extent where they themselves are putting themselves in danger or jeopardy. That's not really the argument I'm making. I'm making the argument that basically says, outside the context of that, if there is a chance to bring that person in where that person can go back home to his family, you should take that chance. And just because the public will give you a fair game in regards to killing somebody doesn't mean you should take it, nor does it mean you're justified in doing so from an ethical, philosophical, legal level. This case aggravates me, Albert.
I can tell. I share your chagrin about this, particularly because of what's going to happen when the verdict comes in. I don't believe that.
Let me ask you this: do you think he's going to get off? Because Shane and I was talking about this. Like from your experience as a defense attorney, what do you think is going to be the result of this case, based on what you know, and for that matter, based on this kind of this space or this leeway that the police are given in regards to killings? Like I've made the point before, 1,000 killings a year, 99% of cops walk. With what I think is only 30% get jail time within the context of that 1%. So their chances of getting off are extraordinarily high. So how do you see this case turning out in the end, and why?
I think that he will receive a lesser charge. He's charged with second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. I'm betting that he's probably going to be found guilty of the manslaughter charge, which carries a 10-year sentence. When he gets something less than the death penalty, the folks are going to go to the streets in Minneapolis and other major cities. So during the next 6 weeks, the 6 weeks after his verdict, I would expect that there'll be major demonstrations across the country. There'll be major burning, looting, loss of property, loss of some lives, and that is very unfortunate. The cities are not preparing for it. Minneapolis is preparing for it, but the rest of the cities in America are not preparing for it. And that is very, very unfortunate for the people who live in those cities and for America, period. And that's what's going to happen.
I could see that, but I honestly don't know that we will see that. I certainly, if there will be protests, it's a matter of how big they'll be and how long lasting they'll be. But last summer's Black Lives Matter protests, you saw something I don't remember seeing previously in American history, which was ongoing occupations on a pretty large scale of territories in multiple cities by people for weeks and in some cases months. And in some cities, nightly protests for month after month after month, literally over 100 days, I think it was in Portland, of nightly protests, which would occasionally break out into riots, property destruction, that kind of thing. But I don't see that kind of thing happening again. I don't see the energy. Doesn't seem like there is energy in the air for that to happen right now. I do believe we'll see protests, but it's just a matter of how large or how long they'll last. Why are you taking that take? And we can also, there's another side of this, which is from the first witness, the dispatcher, the first witness called in Derek Chauvin's trial, who used the phrase snitch, used the word snitch. She recounted in her call to the sergeant in charge of Chauvin and the other officers on this case. She said, "I don't want to be a snitch," but she was shocked at what she was seeing on the video. I mean, a couple of minutes ago, we were talking about, you and Jamarl got into the issue of the climate of mutual protection that police officers will engage in when it comes to legal cases. Where part of why it's fairly rare to see a conviction of a police officer. What do you make out of her saying she didn't want to be a snitch? How do you see that as a defense attorney, Albert?
I think that her use of the term snitch was unfortunate. She's an officer, not a cop, but a dispatcher, but she's still an officer. And so her obligation is to tell the truth as she saw it. She thought that this was excessive. She thought that this restraint lasted long after George Floyd stopped resisting. And I think that she was correct on that. I think that she should not have used the term snitch. That was inflammatory and should not have been permitted in the courtroom.
No, I think it's honest. No, she was being honest. Like, I got to be honest. I think that's a revealing quote. Like, I know you're saying inflammatory, but if she's just saying, I felt this way, how is she not being honest?
I think she is being honest. I just think that it was an unfortunate use of a term, and it's an inflammatory term. This is already the most inflammatory trial probably in American history. And so we should all do our best to be reasonable and rational. And I think that was just a little step across the bound. But
no, I guess, Albert, what I'm saying is, if she is experiencing something as an individual, she's sitting at her dispatch, she feels like, I want to tell this, but I feel like I'm telling on my coworker. If I do this, I'm breaking the blue wall of silence. And she said, I felt like a snitch. That's how she felt. I guess I'm saying, if that's literally how she felt, how is it inflammatory if she's just being honest about her intentions? And like I said, I think it's revealing in the context of this blue wall of silence that she feels like she's betraying on some level. What if she said, I felt like I was betraying my coworker? Would that have been valid?
I think that she should have described what she saw in a calm, professional manner without muddying the waters with some additional emotion, which I suspect strongly was planted there by the lawyers. That I'll bet money that she may have felt that.
Are you really believe that? Why do you think that? Like, what gives, wait a minute, real quick. What's there to give you that thought that the lawyers planted that into her speech?
50 years of experience in courtrooms in eight states across this country. Actually, probably more than that, with counting federal courts. Probably 15 states I've practiced law in, handled cases in, and I know what lawyers do. And it would certainly be probable that a lawyer wanting to inject that kind of emotion into the trial helped her select the word snitch. And it's unfortunate that we have that much emotion. We don't need it. We don't need it. The facts are clear.
And you would know this better than I would, but what could complicate this is if there is a recording of the call that Jenna Scurry, the dispatcher we're talking about, if there's a recording of the call that she made to that sergeant, and you would know better than I would, again, if there is a recording of that call. But if there is, and it comes out that she didn't say it, I would see that as the defense damning themselves here. Or the prosecution damning themselves here. What's your take?
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. What we're missing, one of the big things that we're missing in all of this issue of the police is the number of people who get shot by police and why. They are 99% of them are resisting arrest. Well, the solution to that, I think, is to have children taught in every school in America, in every grade from kindergarten through graduation, how to deal with police encounters, how to respond respectfully. You cannot say to the cops, "Leave me alone, man, I ain't doing nothing." You cannot walk away from the police officers when they stop you. You do have to cooperate with them. They may be wrong, and if they're wrong, you can challenge them, but you cannot challenge them from the graveyard. You have to challenge them from the courtyard.
So just to be clear, cops are such wild animals that you have to have kids taught in school how not to basically get killed by the tiger. That's astonishing. Shouldn't the responsibility be on some level for cops to de-escalate as opposed to having to go to each and every kid to say, hey, don't mess with these wild beasts? Because that's the way it sounds like you're talking about them, that they're wild animals that you can't necessarily engage with, and that you have to basically teach kids from a very early age how not to die in dealing with them. That's pretty extreme, Albert.
Actually, I'm not saying that cops are wild animals. I'm saying that police officers are armed defenders of the public, and the fact that they are armed and they have a job to do. Kids, young people, those who are lying dead now with their mothers crying at gravesides, they cannot walk away from the cops. They cannot resist the cops. They cannot fight with the cops, as Michael Brown did, for example. You cannot. Even the Obama Justice Department investigated that and could not find that the police officer did anything wrong. The boy was resisting the cop, fighting with the cop, trying to take the cop's gun, and the cop shot him, but he's dead. And the only reason he's dead is because he resisted. He did not know how to, he had not been taught how to deal with cops. When I was in the civil rights movement, between age 15 and age 20, I was arrested or stopped by the police officers about 150 times. And that was during the 1950s and 60s when you didn't mess with cops. But my parents had taught me how to deal respectfully with officers. And so I'm alive many years later to have this conversation with you. Cops are not wild animals, but we cannot be wild animals when we deal with the cops either.
Well, part of what's I hear your point, Albert, but part of what makes this seem like a downward spiral is that after last summer's protests and just in general, and I think for good reason, the public confidence, the public trust in police is at record lows. Where again, last August, as these protests were still taking place and kind of well into them, for the first time in almost 30 years, for the first time in its history of polling, Gallup showed that a majority of adults do not trust law enforcement. They do not trust police. So even if there's going to be an effort to get people to engage more amicably with the police, there needs to be a lot of movement on the other side. And I doubt that that's going to happen. Those are going to happen together. But even if we were to go with that, even if that was the right solution, it seems like that is a hard road to hoe right now. That seems like a difficult process to go through where less people trust police than ever. We got to close out here. But any last comment there, Albert?
Yes. I think that we need to do two things. We need to have a police protection bill passed in the federal system where they make sure what level of force is necessary to respond to resisting people. And we need to teach children how to respect and respond to police officers and when and where to challenge police, not on the streets. They
Wait.
wind up dead.
Real quick, Albert, in 30 seconds, poverty and how it plays into this. Can you give a take on that also?
I don't think that poverty plays fatherless children who grow up in homes where there are no fathers to discipline them. I think that the level of disrespect and disregard that children are subjected to, the way that they're permitted to grow up right now, is a big part of this. It's the biggest part of this.
Oh, wow. Okay. I disagree with that, but fair enough. Fair enough. The voice that you guys are listening to is Albert I'm sorry. Yeah, there we are. The voice that you guys are listening to is Elbert Guillory. He's a former member of both the Louisiana State Senate and Louisiana House of Representatives. Also, you can follow Elbert on Twitter at Elbert Guillory. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back in a moment with the wrap.